So in my last video, I explained to you what exactly the Trump administration is doing in terms of tariffs and trade war, etc., etc. Now, if that video was clear, then we're going to proceed towards what exactly tariffs are. I'm not going to give you an extreme opinion on this. I'm just going to sort of go broadly as to what the economic experts such as Ray Dalio talk about. There could be two scenarios within this whole trade war, tariffs war, and how it can affect us and how we can actually benefit from it. So there's two segments where I have divided this. So scenario 1 and scenario 2, which is actually how Ray Dalio, who's a very successful macro investor, explains this whole situation, and I'm just going to put it in extremely layman terms for you guys to understand. Okay, let's go. So in scenario 1, Ray Dalio says that the first issue, the first sort of thing that will happen through tariffs is going to be raise of revenue, which is quite clear, which is exactly what the Trump administration wants. They're wanting to raise revenue to reduce so they can put back into the debt they have and reduce the debt so they can, borrow more money and put that debt towards growth sectors. The problem here for America isn't that they have a big debt, but the problem is that because all that debt is actually hasn't helped them at all over the decades, and actually has reduced their productivity. So they're wanting to refinance some of that debt and actually help them put that into the growth sectors so that they can actually go ahead and do more things. Their biggest problem right now is being debt is just so important because there are also other sort of countries that are struggling with the same thing. So if this in principle works, like it works in theory, it actually works in practical life, we will see some sort of very drastic geopolitical and economical changes. So that's the first point. The revenues are going to be raised through this tax, which is tariffs, because when a country does import some sort of goods, they essentially, tariffs are sort of like a charge to get those goods that they're buying from them, and these are usually paid by the country that is imposing the tariffs. And this situation, US government is imposing the tariffs, so the US citizens or the US sectors that those tariffs are going to would be sort of paying those tariffs to the government, and it's going to be sort of in a way that could increase the inflation within that country, but also deflate the countries to whom the tariffs have been imposed, which sort of takes me to the second point, which is we're going to see reduction in global efficiency. So the global trade is going to sort of just reduce because of this, because a lot of the countries wouldn't want to actually even export those goods anymore, because they would just think that those tariffs are going to be in place. So even if they do export it, the countries where it's getting imported to, the citizens may not want to buy them, or the sectors that sell those products wouldn't want to buy them because they just believe that this is going to be an additional cost coming out of their pocket, which is again going to be an issue for them. So another point number 3 would be stagflation. This is the most feared scenario out of this whole thing that a lot of economists are fearing at the moment, which is the fact that the whole world economy can go into a position of stagflation. If you haven't heard this term, stagflation essentially in layman terms means we can see inflated prices, low employment, or very extremely bad employment rate, and also seeing high increase of prices can cause stagflation, and also which means that the economic growth slows down. When there's less hiring, that means there's not a lot of liquidity in the market. So this stagflation can be a huge issue, which will in turn also reduce the liquidity in the market in sort of all the countries, which is going to be an issue. Another scenario is sort of point 4 of the scenario 1 would be international disruption. So pertinent to my point 2, international disruption would be caused because the free trade that we have at the moment, where where all the countries can trade freely without any sort of government hindrance, any regulations, is going to be disrupted now, and we're going to see an immense amount of international disruption, which is going to cause huge globalization issues. So currently the market is a free market. Any country can trade with another country without any taxes or any other government regulations. That's what the free trade means. But because of this tariff situation, the international disruption will be caused, which will again in lieu cause issues with the globalization. So we will see deglobalization here, which brings me to my point number 5, which is self-reliance. A lot of countries will start going towards self-reliance. They won't want to even trade anymore because, like I said, tariffs can cause that issue, because a lot of countries would be like, well, if I want to get these goods imported into my country, I'm essentially paying extra for it, whereas I could just be, manufacturing it here, which is the whole point of America doing that. But in reality, Americans don't have that skill to manufacture anymore, because for years and years, the last 20-30 years, the whole manufacturing hub has been shifted to China. And even now when we see in China, everything is just automated. So I'm not sure how exactly America is going to achieve that goal of becoming taking all the manufacturing in-house, because there's a whole lot of automation, etc., that will go into it. But I'm sure all these big corporations have invested some sort of money to it, and they think that taking it actually back home to America will yield some sort of fruit. But like I said, only time will tell. So that is the first scenario. Let's jump on to the second scenario, which is also another scenario which Ray Dalio presents forward. But look, the first scenario already is pretty bad as well. So the second scenario is kind of also, in terms, they're kind of interrelated, but not really. But let's just go through it. The first point is reciprocal tariffs, which could be a pretty bad thing, which essentially means reciprocal tariffs means that America has already, we're seeing actually this now already, America has imposed a 37% tariff to China, and China in turn has actually come back and said, yeah, we're going to impose the same amount of tariffs on you guys. So you guys exporting any goods coming into China will actually be tariffed at the same rate, which is going to, like I said, cause stagflation within the economy. Again, not the best thing to do, but there's not much that can be done about it. This has already been done, so the bull's already been fired. So now we just have to sort of wait and see how it turns out to be. The second point is deflation and inflation. So deflation and inflation, these are the two characteristics which will be driven by the tariffs. So essentially, we'll see that once these tariffs are sort of set in place, we'll see some countries the prices are going to be inflated, which is going to be essentially America, because they're the ones who are imposing the tariffs. So their country is going to go through a period of inflation again, or maybe it doesn't work as it's meant to, and they may see some deflation. But in Australia, we'll see there's going to be a sort of type of deflation coming through, because essentially whatever goods we do sort of take to America, we do export to America, are not going to be exported in such an amount anymore. I think the people in America would just be like, well, we don't want to pay these tariffs, so we are not going to actually export these goods. I think it's more also the fact that people will start thinking that way, and then they'll just reduce the exports for Australia, which then the RBA would have to go back and see if they would want to cut the interest rates. ANZ has already come out and said that we're going to see multiple interest rate cuts within the next sort of few months, which is kind of a good thing, but also we'll see maybe the real estate prices sliver a bit, but depending on the supply and demand. I don't think that would happen, but we'll see interest rates come down, and then I think this is also going to be a very temporary thing from Trump, where he does put the tariffs and then maybe he takes them off. So that's going to help us, because we'll see that everything, and we're seeing this already, that the stock market has dived down, all the asset markets are diving down, and then this is going to actually help the RBA to liquidate the market. So they're going to cut the interest rates down. We're going to see more stimulus in the market. And then again, at the very end of 2025, all these sort of activities are going to take a deep dive, and then they're going to hit rock bottom. Then the RBA is going to come in, intervene, and they're going to reduce the interest rates. And then we're going to see this property market or any other asset class market skyrocket in 2026. That's sort of where the trajectory is going at the moment, but it could go a different way just depending on how much and how many countries actually put in reciprocal tariffs to to America. So it's yet to be seen. So we've covered point 2 and point 3. Now point 4 is economic recession, which is also some of the feed economists are saying that this is a scenario where we can see stagflation, which will essentially lead to economic recession if this does get carried on for a long time. But I think that America would already know this, so they would probably not want to put these tariffs for a very long period of time. This may just be an incentive to sort of get some negotiations going on, because at the end of the day, China, being the biggest exporter, is going to come out and have a meeting with America, because these are the two superpowers, and they're going to, at the end of the day, decide that how much and what things should be tariffed, or if we should take the tariffs out completely. In this whole scenario, that we will see the dollar devaluation as well, which will help, but we don't need to go into too much detail with that. Let's just jump onto the impacts on Australia. What we'll see is that the direct impact on Australia isn't a whole lot, so we're fine. I mean, 10% tariffs on the agricultural and the iron ore industry that we have, where we sort of sell our beef to America and we sell our iron ore and steel and all those sort of things to America, it's only 10% tariff, so it's not going to see a whole amount of, it's not going to have a very intense effect on it. To say it's only, the economists are estimating it to be only 0.4% of the GDP, which is it's something, but it's not, in a whole grand scheme of things, the direct effect is not as bad. What we're worried about though is the indirect impact. So the indirect impact is going to be from America putting these tariffs on China of 34-37%, is going to impact Australia, because China is going to obviously slow down on sort of, you know, exporting, because they're getting tariffed so much and all those sort of things. They already have a property bubble and property crisis. So we are the biggest partners. Australia's China's biggest trading partner. Not in the world, I mean, for Australia, China is the biggest trading partner. So for Australia to sell the iron ore and, you know, aluminium and all those sort of refined steel to China, is we may see a reduction there, because China, like I said, is going to struggle with the economy with the tariffs coming in place, and also having a property bubble. Their real estate is sort of going through the gutter at the moment, so we're not going to see as much of an import from China for these materials. So that may actually cause a 1% in total impact to our current GDP, which I think equates to about $20 to $30 billion, which is a decent amount. And because of that, we'll see, like I said, interest rates drop a lot, which is, you know, which was actually my last point, but we'll jump on to the third point, which is the trade diversion. This is an interesting point in terms of trade diversion, because I think that this point that I'm adding in is a point to state that in 2020 we saw that, you know, Trump did put in tariffs onto China, and then we sort of try to divert to other countries like Vietnam, India, and South Korea and Japan. So these are also, they come in the top 5 trading partners for Australia. So we can see the Australian government, if they're smart enough, if the Labor Party is, I'm not sure, they might divert and find other ways of trading instead of China. If China, you know, we rely on China so heavily, so we may have to trade with all those 5 nations. And I know that Vietnam and India are going through a very intense and crazy development stage. So we may actually use those countries to export iron and ore, which may fulfill that 1% demand, but may not. Just like I said, only time will tell. But that is one of the options that the government may look into. Yeah, the economic slowdown is just bound to happen for sort of all the countries, including Australia, and that's why we'll see the interest rates chop down. So we may see the interest rates. ANZ came out, and also Combank and NAB, sort of all the banks are going to start throwing in their prediction in the next week, but ANZ has been early on over the weekend, and they have come out with a prediction saying that the interest rates as they stand at the moment for at 4.10 may actually go to 3.85 and 3.10 by the start of next year. So that's actually kind of a good thing. And also, because of this gap within the market where we are going to see that the tariffs are going to cause a lot of fear within the market, this actually presents an opportunity for younger generation like myself and you. If you're watching, then this is the right time where the prices may be, not property sector in Australia, because we just have such a crazy supply and demand issue here with property, but other sectors like, the stock market, where you can invest your money and you can actually see some solid returns, because you'll see, or even Bitcoin, you'll see the market, dive down a huge amount. We're already seeing Dow Jones, S&P 500 lose like 400 to 1600 points, which is the greatest loss we've had since 2020 COVID started. So we're going to see an economic slowdown, and this is where the opportunity presents for younger generation. This is the time where we can actually make some wealth. So don't focus on sort of the other parts. This is just to give you an idea of what's going to happen, but focus more on the lower part where we will see the economic slowdown, and then the RBA is going to cut down the interest rate to stimulate the market with liquidity, and then everything is dependent on liquidity. So we're actually going to see a very cyclical cycle to begin from the end of 2025, and then it will go to 2026. But 2026 is the main year where we will see the asset prices, asset classes just shoot up, and it's going to be a good chance to make some economical growth. So I hope this video was helpful to you, and just keep watching, and I'll come out with more stuff and as we go and see how it goes. Thank you.